Uh, we are live on here. Guys, welcome to our August think tank. It's great to see so many of you. I think the topic probably had something to do with it, as well as post summer stuff. So we're going to get to our guest and get into the topic today. As with all the calls, guys, if you're new or maybe a first time, long time kind of thing, we want to try to do our best to give you guys some amazing information, some resources, and to create a dialogue. I recognize that sometimes it's difficult to create a dialogue on the call. We're going to do the best we can. I've asked Shane to give some pauses and some moments where we can dialogue a little. But obviously, the chat's there. Some of our Momentum guys are in the chat, and they'll do their best to navigate that, as well as if there's stuff that maybe we want to throw at Shane from the chat, we will do that as well. So don't be afraid to unmute if something catches you. Unless you're going to blow the room up, then do that offline. But if you want to use the chat to throw questions, that would be really, really fantastic. As always, if you're watching this afterwards, we appreciate you being here. We will send out the deck and send out this recording so that those of you that couldn't be part of it will get it. One quick shameless plug for those of you that are kind of out there in the woods going, yeah, I'm going to go to Vegas in October, but I haven't done it yet. We've now reached that point where you need to make some calls and get here. And so we would love to have you guys jump in. We're going to have more people this year than we've had, but it's still boutique enough that you're going to get a chance to interact with some other executive level church leaders like yourself and have some good times. We try to spoil you while you're here and give you a bunch of really good content. Steve Cuss is going to be with us. We're going to be talking about resiliency and leadership, but not just from the standard ways. We're going to have some young emerging leaders talk about how are we resilient in leading young leaders so that our ministry continues to thrive. We've got some other guys that are going to be sharing just even physically what we need to be doing habitually with our physical bodies so that we can be resilient and have some longevity in ministry. So that's going to be our general topic. We'll have some breakouts and some other things and some really, really great meals and activities. So the link is there. If you've been waiting, honestly, one, I would tell you to register, and two, just travel arrangements and stuff can be a little tricky in Vegas. So if you're going to plan on being here, you're going to want to come in and get that taken care of. Cool. So again, we look forward to seeing you guys. If you can make it out, we think it's going to be the best conversation yet. So really, really cool. All right. So want to introduce Shane to you guys. We felt like that this was probably the time to pause and address maybe not, I guess I can't say the elephant in the room because that sounds partisan, but address the topic that at different levels we're all going to be approaching. And I'll tee up Shane in this way. Like Shane is not coming on here in any way, shape, or form as the ultimate expert on this topic, but he does have years and years of experience navigating the good, the bad, and the ugly, and he'll share with you some of all of that as in the leaderships here. And I've been able to serve with him for many, many years, and just love his character, and thought he would be a great person to address this because I just know we've navigated it as well. Okay. So one of the ways I just wanted to set it up for you guys was really just to say, today we're going to be talking about navigating the election without losing your mind or losing your church. There's a book out right now by Curtis Chang and Nancy French. And you know that Lee and Kay and our team, we feel like the world is driven by 2x2s. Like every good thing has a 2x2 that can work. So this is a new one that I found these guys talking about, but it really tees up Shane's conversation today because it really draws the parallel between where people are on the political spectrum, not from a Democrat, Republican, Independent, but more like where's their emotional state, and it draws the line between how much hope they have or lack and how much humility they have or lack. And I thought it was pretty cool because it really talks about this idea of hope being high. If hope is high, then and humility is low, they're going to be combative. And you've got some of those people. Shane will talk about some of those folks that we've had the joy of dealing with. If hope is low, and humility is low, then they're probably going to be facing this season in a cynical way as a cynic. If humility is high but hope is low, they're probably just exhausted. They're in a good place, but as far as humility, but they're exhausted. And then high humility, high hope really is where they're really leaning into politics as a disciple of Jesus. I just thought this was a pretty cool picture of kind of the different boxes that people might be in. There's probably a lot of unpacking we could do with that, but it might be an interesting conversation for you to have. Shane, I'll just hand it to you. You can take this and run with it through what you have to present to us, and we'll throw some questions at you as we go along.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's good to be with you. I know many of you and cheering you on. And I mean, we've come to that season again where, it's like we didn't think it could, hopefully it will never be as bad as it was in 2020. But, this is the most polarizing seasons for us as church leaders, as pastors. And let me tell you why this discussion is a big deal. It is because we're not just polarized, we're traumatized. There is so much trauma that comes with what we have been through. And politics split churches apart in 2020 in ways that we've never seen before. And we all have our stories. In the middle of, last time, we had the pandemic, we had the George Floyd stuff, we had all the political climate. And if your churches are like our churches, we lost people on both sides for the same decisions. And honestly, it wasn't all bad. I mean, it was kind of nice to prune out some of that political stuff. But here is a statistic that I thought was really telling, is that one in six families are no longer talking to a family member because of politics. So think about that. Think about how that affects where our people are and where we are. And Jesus' prayer for the church was unity. And so I'm just going to just share some learnings that I've had in the past seasons that I have navigated this. And so I'm really just framing this up in three ways. And here is area number one that I'm just calling leading yourself. Leading yourself. When we started the Crossing 24 years ago, we're getting ready to celebrate our 24th anniversary in September. My vision was a multi-generational, multi-ethnic church. That there is something super cool about seeing older adults sitting next to teenagers and young adults, that I love. We've got, Marv and Margie who are in their 80s sitting next to tatted and pierced people and loving them. And, it's the affluent sitting next to the not so affluent. It is Black, white, Asian, Latino, Hispanic, all worshiping together. But that also includes political diversity. And I'm just telling you, probably in your reality, like my reality, this has not always been easy. We started the Crossing during the 2000 elections. Now, some of you are way too young to even remember hanging chads and pregnant chads. You don't even know what that means, but some of you do know what that means. We didn't even know who the president was going to be until mid-December. It was 4 to 5 weeks after the elections that we even knew. But in the run up to the election, and I mean, again, we were a brand new church. There was a guy who wanted to pass out voter guides to everyone who came to church that day. And, I mean, as you know, voter guides are always one-sided based on whatever political party that you come from. I mean, do you love babies or do you love killing babies? It is one of those things that it's crazy how one-sided they are. Obviously, we're pro-life, but there is nothing that voter guides help us with. Well, we had this confrontation in the middle of the lobby, and I told him, we are not passing those out. Well, he got mad and he stormed out of church, and he told me he was going to go to a church that stood up for the truth. And so that began a process for me of looking towards leaders that I respected to see how they handled these issues. And I just couldn't find a better example than Billy Graham. Billy Graham was a pastor to both Republican and Democrat presidents. And what he said shaped my early years of ministry. And here's what he was quoted as saying is, "I'm not for the left wing or the right wing. I'm for the whole bird." And I just made a decision that day that I was going to dedicate my life to raising the banner of Christ. That I'm not going to raise the Republican flag. I'm not going to raise the Democrat flag. I'm going to lift up Jesus and lift up what he taught. And as you think about the Lord's Prayer, may your kingdom come. And so, so you think about, as you've traveled the world, I mean, I've been in communist countries. I've been in incredibly impoverished countries, and we love our country. But you think about the kingdom that's been established in all of those countries. Well, we're to pray that we want God's kingdom to come. We want kingdom first. So, my question for us is, how are you going to lead yourself during this time? Because your church will take its cue from you. And so, as you think about, we can start talking about pastors who, the way that they lead themselves in these times is, that they become very political. I'll just tell you about one church we have here in Vegas during the 2000 elections. And again, I don't care whether you're on the right or the left. Okay, so it doesn't matter. Our church has both. Our staff has both. But Lee and I are, there's a know this church well. Well, during the 2020 elections, this pastor hosted Donald Trump in church, and he just fawned all over Donald Trump. Well, it had been a church that has been strong in our community for decades. It absolutely split the church. And the church is a shadow of what it once was, and it was because of this issue. And so, it's like, how are you going to lead yourself during this political environment? And because if your church is going to take a cue from you, what do you want that to be? So you have to decide that. For me, a long time ago, like I said, I just decided, I'm not going to raise a flag on either side, because I just think candidates are flawed. I'm going to raise the flag of Jesus. So, number one, how are you going to lead yourself? Here's number two. Is
And hold on for just a second. Go back to
Okay.
that for just a second. Let's pause before we go forward. As you've done that, right? As we've done that, and you're probably going to get into this a little bit, seeing your notes, but like, because you've chosen a different direction, maybe talk about some of the preparation these guys need to have for what that legitimate choice is going to potentially mean that they have to navigate.
Well, in a personal way, are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I think for you, it is, I'll just tell you, one of the greatest compliments that I get from people is they will catch me in the lobby and they will say, "I'm not sure which political party you're with." And so obviously I vote my conscience and I vote and all of that. But to me, that is a great compliment to me, because I want to minister to our entire church, not to half our church. And outside of the political fringes, I was frankly fine with, it was kind of painful during 2020 when you have people blowing you up as they're leaving the church. But man, it was a breath of fresh air to have those political divisions that are gone on either side. And and so it's for me, it is being very careful not to use buzzwordy things that align yourself with one side or the other. Um, Obviously, I'm going to use scripture. I'm going to talk about what Jesus says, but I'm not going to use, I'm going to refrain from any type of words or phrases that associate me with a particular side, because then I've lost half my audience.
Great, that's helpful. Anybody else want to address specifically the leading yourself in this season before we move to the next section? Feel free to unmute. We're going to talk about staff in your church next, so we'll get those questions in just a second. Going once, going twice. Okay,
Lee,
Shane. Oh, there we
this,
go. Jump in. Yeah,
no,
introduce yourself.
Chris from Santa Paula, California. But for me personally, I've just turned off the news, man. Like,
Mm.
I don't watch news like I used to, because I found my heart getting hard and bitter and frustrated, and it was actually influencing what was coming out of my mouth on Sundays, and I felt in a bad way, and so I've just chosen to not get caught up in that news cycle like I used to. For what
And I will, and I think that is just what I chose to do after 2020 is, and again, this is just me. I don't know whether this is right or
You took
wrong,
an
but
aggressive social media
yeah,
fast too.
I just stopped doing social media. I just got so tired of the hateful direct messages and ways, and I just got off social media. And so for me, that was just a huge relief.
It got you out of there, yeah, because you were
Yeah,
navigating the comment section. Hey, Chris, you got a
yeah.
question? Chris, if you have a question, go for it, bud.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I'm moving around a little bit. Didn't want to make you guys busy. First of all, Pastor Lee, I want to say thank you for your boldness to even host this conversation for us. And Pastor Shane, thank you so much for being transparent and even just how you're starting out. I've got to jump off in a little bit, so I want to jump in maybe and just ask this quick question in light of what you just said, the church that is a shell of itself now, right? My issue by and large with the conversation that we're having today is, how do we as pastors engage with other pastors and other churches who we may not feel like are representing the kingdom well?
Mm. It's a great question.
Chris, that's a great question. So, Shane, I'll let you try.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is one of those things that is I mean, we all know pastors who are very vocal about their political stance. And and they've, I mean, as leading yourself, I mean, that's the choice that they've made, for them. I think for my friends who are very vocal, it is. I was sharing yesterday something I learned from Mike Breaux, when people who come to you in the lobby and are very critical towards something, they have a different opinion. You know, I I will just say, well, you might be right, but let me just tell you why I come from where I come from. Why I have this view, and I found that it diffuses it, and and I think the best that we can is to try it. But usually those people are so forceful that it's like, I'm not going to convince them.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to share, hey, here's where I am, and I just don't think I'm going to change their mind most of the time.
I think what Chris brings up is a huge deal too, because we're here on this call right now. There's 50 of us, and the reality is, even on this call, is most of us are relationally connected. There could be guys who, their conviction is they want to take a more aggressive stance on things, and I might disagree with that. So I think, to Chris's question, I think number one, I want to acknowledge the nuance of how difficult it is, right? When, like, even for Shane and I dealing with other guys within our city who are taking a different approach to this season, to try to actually reflect what we would teach others, right? He's going to talk about some practical stuff at the end, but I mean, we've got to live that out as well, right? So it's like, how do I love unconditionally while disagreeing with them? I think, to Chris's, like, it does get really, really heated, especially even among church leaders and their perspective on things. And so it's a little cliche, but I think we've tried to just maintain the relational connection with those individuals and not allow uh, their practical political choices to 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 destroy that. Unfortunately, some of our more extreme people have kind of opted out on their own. Unfortunately, they don't really want to remain in relationship typically when they go down that path, and that's pretty unfortunate. Shane, you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. So that first part, leading yourself, you got to choose how you're going to lead yourself. And like I said, I'm not saying one way is right or the other. I'm just telling you what I have chosen to do. Here's number two, is leading your staff and key volunteers. And so here's the thing of teaching your staff, and our all staff meeting is coming up this next week, and so I will share all things with our staff again, and I do it every political season. But being on staff means you have to give up some of your rights to be vocal about your opinions, because it doesn't just reflect on them, it reflects on the church. And I'm just telling you, every political season, I have to clean up a mess that one of my staff created, a little firestorm that they created because they will have a political opinion and voice it. And so you know, it's one of those things that if you're going to be on staff, you've got to learn how to monitor yourself. And so we have a motto here, and this isn't, I didn't make this up. This comes from the heritage of where our churches come from, but it's an essentials unity, and opinions liberty, and all things love. That in essentials, we're going to have unity, that we believe that Jesus is the one only Son of God. We will die on the hill for that. For our church community, we believe that marriage, that sexual expression happens in marriage between a man and a woman, and so we're going to stand in unity on that. But in opinions, we're going to allow liberty, and we have a lot of opinions. There's a lot of opinions on our staff. There's a lot of opinions in our church. And so we want to allow liberty for people to hold their own opinions, but in all things love, that we are going to hold to a place of loving people. I was on a Zoom call with Ed Stetzer last week, and Ed Stetzer said this. He said, every church is one social media post away from an emergency, whether the post is true or not. You probably see this all the time. Somebody posts something, they make an accusation, your staff does something, it becomes an emergency.
We just all canceled. We all deleted our social media in the last 5 seconds, basically.
Yeah, I figured everybody would.
Yeah.
And obviously not just politics, but so you think about your church culture, that one of your staff posts something, they can cause an emergency in your church. One of your church members posts something, it can all of a sudden change the whole trajectory of where you guys are heading. So I'll just tell you what I'm going to be telling our staff next week. That again, you have your opinions, that's great. But I will be telling our staff not to post, like, or repost political content. There's just no win. There is no win. That our church is purple. We are made up of half right and half left leaning people. And so whatever you post is going to alienate half of your church. And so one of the guys I was with last week has a large church, a huge social media platform, and without even knowing it, he liked a post he was just flipping through and he liked a post of what was a politically um, polarizing topic. And so a friend of his goes, just text him and goes, "Hey, I don't know if you realize what post you liked." And so he was able to unlike that because all of a sudden it put him in the camp with something he didn't believe in. And so that's how I'm going to lead. It's what we're going to be talking with our staff about. For volunteers, when you're volunteering, again, you're representing the church. So it's reminding volunteers not to wear politically motivated clothing. If you show up with a MAGA hat, you're not volunteering if you don't, leave that. If you show up with um, a Kamala shirt, you're not going to be able to wear that. So we'll give you a different shirt. There's just no win in that. And so those are some of the things that we will be leading our staff and volunteers on that. So I'll just pause here and let you.
And Joe was having a quick tension, like the idea of obviously people on our staff, and we would encourage them to be active in, politics as far as whatever fits them, have their convictions. We were just having a quick conversation around, there is a protocol or a stewardship or a boundary when you come into the church organization and you choose to be part of that. And so it's definitely a tension to manage of, like he said here, and I love that Joe said this. He's like, the staff will respond. To have the opinion that he actually said.
Have the opinion that you tell me.
Yeah.
So I have to have the opinion of my senior pastor, which it sounds like an essential, not an opinion where there's liberty.
Yeah. Right. And that's where I would say, you don't have to have my opinion. But I'm not posting my opinions online.
Right.
How do you balance that with, if I don't, I cannot have your opinion, but I have to have your opinion in how I express it?
Well, to me, it is, and I'll let whoever else, as they're navigating, speak to this. But again, I'm not asking you to express my opinion. I'm asking you not to engage in politically polarizing posts. And so, I'm just thinking through this. If it is a moral issue and you go, I stand for this moral issue,
right?
That's different than, and our church knows that we hold to a biblical standard of marriage.
Yeah.
It has been politicized, but that's where I would be okay with, we're going to do this in love. Right. So we're going to say, hey, this is where our view is. We're not taking a political stance on this. It sounds like we are. That to me, that is okay. It's when we're posting, hey, stuff that is for or against a political candidate. Right. That's where it really becomes.
So, Joe, where we've tried to coach our younger staff, and it's not just younger staff, so I don't want to pick on them, but they tend to be pretty active. Where we've tried to coach them is more through the filter of the response. In other words, what's driving you to feel the need to publicize your perspective, and try to dig into that a little bit, because we're fine with their perspective, right? Even if it's a little different than what Shane and I would have. Shane and I have different perspectives. What I always want to dig into is there an agenda that's driving you to feel like you've got to publicize or go public around that particular thing? Because that generally, if there is something we want to unpack together to make sure that we have a united front as far as what we're trying to accomplish as a church, right? And so that's where, even with politics or sexual ethics or things like that, I always want to dig into what's motivating them. We did have a season where we had some staff that were not on the same page with us, alongside our standard of sexual ethic that we believe is biblical. And so we were okay wrestling with that question with them. But when they started going public with their perspective in a way that we felt like was confusing to the church and to the church body for them to be in leadership, that's where we had to have harder conversations around that, right?
Yeah.
And so, not trying to dodge your question at all, but more just kind of go, I would dig into what's motivating them to want to be so, I mean, to our chart earlier, combative potentially around that. You know,
Yeah,
it's tense.
there's no easy question. I just know that this one is coming and is one that I've had to deal with previously before as well too. So I'm just curious about that.
Right.
So that's why I'm just
maybe-
eliciting it. And I was just thinking, Lee, I mean, as you guys do a good job at keeping us to be thinking through our values and such, of just being able to say, okay, like how can I frame it so that we think of it through the values of who we are and through the lens of mission of Jesus, as opposed to do and don't. Instead, just like, hey, okay, how can we include Jesus into this area of our life as opposed to the other, like do this, don't do that? Because I can see like one age group saying, if you try and control me, I'm going to do the complete opposite because you're trying to control me, even if that's how it comes across. Just my experience. So,
I love Joe. I love Joe talking about values, and any of you that have worked with any of our team on, any of your staffing, et cetera, we always talk about, mission through the, strategy needs to be driven through values. I'll give you an example, Joe, from us, and then we'll move on. That has to do, again, not necessarily in the political arena, but it all touches, where we were dealing with the LGBTQ conversation, and we about a year and a half ago, where we really had to start to go, okay, we've got to bring some clarity. We did start with our values, and two of them came to mind. One was, we want to be a come as you are environment. So we wanted to lead with that. Like, that needs to drive how we position this conversation. And then number two value that we have was, transformation is the expectation of every believer. Now that gets complicated, right? But at least we began to say, okay, we want to be a come as you are environment, and our goal is for people to become more and more like Christ. And then obviously the conversation got nuanced, but it helped us to begin from that value position foundationally to then move into strategically and practically, how do we deal with those issues? So I love that you mentioned the idea of values, because I think it is a way to go back to your team even and say, hey, it's not even that you're being you're being out of line, but you're in contrast to the value that we want to have if we're positioning ourselves in ways that people can't come as you are. So real good.
Also helps lead to what you're for as opposed to what you're against. So I love that. Those are great ones. Thanks for letting me ask.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would even say maybe the better way of saying it is to be very, very careful in what you post, repost, and like that. One of the things that I talk to our programming team is the decisions that you make privately in a room, I have to defend publicly. So I have to stand out in the lobby with people who are angry. And if a staff member posts something polarized, it's just sideways energy. And so I want to be able to defend all my staff, but there's times where they post something and I'm like, I can't defend that. Even though I kind of agree with it, you've just caused a firestorm for me that is just sideways energy. And so it's not asking to not be involved. It's asking to have the crossings for us, our reputation above your own right to speak out. And so
let's go to the last one. Yeah, let's go to the last one.
Yeah, let's pivot to leading your church. And so here's what's interesting in this. If I were given the assignment to come up with a sermon series to demonstrate why the Republican platform is in sync with the teachings of Jesus, I could do that. And if someone else came up to me and said, Shane, would you create a sermon to show that the Democratic platform is in sync with the teachings of Jesus, I could do that too. And so it's one of those things that we find this tension that we are in, that we have to navigate. And so here's just kind of piggybacking on where we were just talking about is is I think one of the hardest things that we have to deal with is the friendly fire that comes from within our church. And so the social media attacks from inside our church, from Christians, it is such sideways energy. And so just as an example, this last season, this last political season, we did a series called "The Separation of Church and Hate," and we did a graphic that was blue and red, but we actually did two graphics. One where it showed that church was in blue and hate was in red, and
I
one
think
that
I
showed.
have it on here on the screen right
Yeah.
now, Shane. There it is.
So the actual graphic that you're looking at, we had a volunteer who, when he saw that, he walked out during his volunteering shift and left the church and then caused all kinds of problems. Well, what he didn't know is because he was saying that, oh, well, red equals hate, Republicans equal hate. Well, we actually had two graphics. We had another one that was the opposite of that, where the blue was, so we're not taking
We
a
actually
stand
flipped it on purpose. We did that on
on
purpose.
purpose.
We like flipped them both. Yeah.
And so you would see, so like all over, you would see different color schemes on one TV and a different TV, but it just shows you how polarizing this is. And so here is our goal. Our goal is to unite around the person of Jesus instead of a political candidate. To unite around the person of Jesus instead of a political candidate. To disagree. To disagree politically and to love unconditionally. Did somebody have something to say? Okay. I love what Frederick Buechner says. He says, although kindness is not the same thing as holiness, it's awfully close. I just think that's just a great thing. And so let me just give you some ideas on how you might lead your church through this. These are things that we've done all of these. The last series that we did on the separation of church and hate, it was 4 parts. We talked about civility, dignity, humility, and unity. So civility, we talked about James 1, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. On dignity, we talked about Acts 10, where the Apostle Peter, in his conversation with Cornelius, he says, I now know that God does not show favoritism. We show dignity to all people. Humility, Lee did a message on Philippians chapter 2. Talking about humility. Unity.
It was really good. It was the best one of the 4.
It was the best sermon of that whole series. And then unity, Jesus' prayer in John chapter 17. I did a message that on offense. And so I almost called this next series that we're talking about Unoffendable. And then we decided to do something different. But it is this idea in Luke chapter 17. Jesus says to his disciples, things that cause people to stumble are bound to come. And this word stumble could also be translated offended. That it's the Greek word scandalon, where we get our word scandal, that things that cause people to stumble, these scandals, they're bound to come. Proverbs 19:11, I think such a great verse. It says, a person's wisdom yields patience, but it is to one's glory to overlook an offense. And this Hebrew word for overlook means to pass over or step over. So think about this, that it's the Hebrew word abar. So if you kind of look at it like this, that it is to our glory when we step over an offense, to step over this bar that causes offense. So I've taught on that before. In this series that we're kicking off
Hey,
this
Shane,
weekend.
pause real quick. So out of those
Yeah.
topics, like the guys are on here, probably some of them, they are in the room when this stuff is being planned. Some of them are in the room when they're writing messages.
Right.
So we're like whatever the date is, end of August. So let's assume some of these guys are like, dang, I need to get my crap together and I'm going to do something. Some of them are already planning on it. What would you say, like, to a guy that maybe wasn't planning on going there? Is there a way to work some of this in, just practically as a communicator, that you might do that wouldn't involve them having to do it 4 weeks?
Yeah. You know what? One of the things that I think is the best way to do vision is to pepper it in. And people would never think, oh my gosh, we just had a vision talk. But but it is continually talking about that vision. I would say the same thing here.
Okay.
Is I have even in the lead up to this series that we're kicking off this weekend. We're just doing 2 weeks. In the lead up to this, I've peppered in these political things of how we're to conduct ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, for you, if you're going, I don't have a series, I don't have a message, you for sure have areas where you can use it as an application point to say, here's how a follower of Christ should conduct themselves so that
Yeah.
we don't lose our witness.
Great.
And
Because I think some guys maybe, I had heard from guys who were like, you know what, I'm not even touching it this year. And I totally get that. And we're not boots on the ground for everybody. So I respect that. I do think though, my encouragement would be, we do have the shepherding responsibility, right?
yeah,
So as our sheep are going through this season, whatever that looks like, particularly in your context, to shepherd them is what you should choose to do. Why don't you talk about that second series so that we don't run out of time?
yep. And what I would also say to you is I think we are traumatized from 2020, and I think we don't want to touch it. But here's where I sense most church leaders are is we've learned how to navigate this better. I think we are in a different season than we were in 2020, and we've learned how to navigate this. We have more experience. We have a little bit thicker skin. But we're doing a series that we're kicking off this weekend called "Don't Lose Your Mind," and so we're just doing 2 weeks on Romans 13. And I gave Lee the job of kicking this off, talking about God and government, the role of government, because he's a pro, I mean. And then I'm going to do the second part of that, which is all about love. So I thought it kind of, I kind of like that. Let him talk about government. I'll talk about love. Um, but some of the things that we're doing is we're this weekend we're passing out voter stickers. And so, Lee, what does the voter sticker say?
So the series is called Don't Lose Your Mind. So we just had our team design a voter sticker that said Decision 2024, but around it, it says, I will not lose my mind. And so we're going to have those stickers for people to wear in the service. So by the time I get up and make them lose their mind, it will say, don't lose your mind throughout the room as a reminder for them of kind of where we want them to be.
One of the things that I've said in the lead up to this series, and of course everybody loves the title of it. They laugh every time, I kind of tease it out there. But the truth is politically, so many of us have lost our mind, and it's caused us to lose our witness. And so it's trying not to do that. Week 2, we're calling that week Voter Guide, and I'm gonna that story I was telling you earlier about the 2000 elections. I'm using that as my intro, but we are passing out a voter guide, and I'll give you these quick hits. Lee can send all these to you if this is something you want to steal and make your own. But we have 6 points on our voter guide that we're passing out. Number 1 is I will commit to Jesus
I
and his
dropped it in the
way.
chat. It's in the chat. It's good.
Okay. Over any political candidate or party. I will respect others as made in the image of God and will not demonize those I disagree with or disagree with me. I'll use social media to reflect Jesus first, my opinion second. I'll filter political participation through my love for God and my love for my neighbor. I'll trust God with the future no matter any election outcome. And I'll recognize that in our church and in my world, I can love people, they can love God, and we can vote differently. And so just really trying to set this up in that way. Um, Anything you want to say about that, Lee? I know we're getting kind of pressed on time. So
We're good. I think that the reality of the voter guide, and I dropped it in there, was we're not trying to say, hey, do the crossing stuff or grow minimum stuff. But I do think it's one of those generic resources that whether you're even doing a series or not, it might be worth a 10-minute prayer moment And then, obviously, I think most of you on the call caught a little bit of the tongue in cheek of people expecting us to give them a voter guide. And what we give them is not a guide on who to vote for, but how to vote as a follower of Christ. And so you can create your own or do something different, but I dropped that in there as a resource for you if that's something that you can jump into. Again, I just want to encourage you, you don't have to go in this call and go to your programming team and scrap everything that you're doing. That's not our intent. It's how do I integrate in the next 6 to 8 weeks some degree of shepherding of people so that we don't lose our mind during this political season. So Shane, we got about 4 minutes and then we want to close the call a little differently than we normally do, just kind of offering a prayer. And I'm going to ask you to do that. Just pray over these guys as they lead through this season. But we have like a few minutes just for open questions. So if anybody wants to carefully unmute and throw questions at Shane. Actually, Shane, can you give that last line that's in the deal? The moment we are in does not what?
The moment that we are in does not pause the mission we are on. The moment that we are in does not pause the mission we are on. So I think, again, my encouragement to you is we all want to avoid this, but I think it is, as somebody put in the chat, if we completely avoid this, it's the donkey and it's the elephant and the donkey.
You can't
in the
say
room.
donkey. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know. I think we lose credibility when we don't acknowledge what is the biggest cultural issue going on in some way, whether it's just to pray about it. And even if it's just in prayer. So anyway, that's it. What questions?
Okay, we got 5 minutes and then we're going to close in prayer. So before you guys bail out and go to lunch or into your next meeting, please unmute one at a time and do that. Don't everybody go at once. I fixed the guide, guys. I dropped the wrong link. Sorry, my bad. Anybody want to ask a quick question? If not, we'll jump off. You got a freebie. You got some graphics that I didn't intend for you to have. So there you go. But it all. Awesome. Shane, thanks for taking on a tough thing because it's, there probably are guys on here that are just going, yeah, some of this is good. Some of it's like just makes me, again, want to get to November 6th or 7th or whatever it is, but appreciate it. Part of that Growmentum is like, we want to work on it, not just in it. So this is the work on it conversation, how you choose to get in it and dive into it in your context, from the West Coast to the East Coast to the cornfields of Wabash, Indiana, whatever is appropriate for you, we would encourage you to do, but just shepherd well, love people well. And we're going to get to the other side. Shane, would you pray for us before we jump out of the call?
Yeah, I will. And just 2 little comments, then I'll pray over us. I'm not saying the way we do it is the way you ought to do it. These are the 3 filters I think you need to think through, though. How you're going to lead yourself, your staff, and your church of whatever context you're in and what is appropriate for your context. So this is just to kind of get you going. I heard Josh Howerton say this, and I just thought I'm going to use it my weekend that I'm preaching on this. When politics starts to become a religion, the candidates become like saviors. Campaigning replaces evangelism. Rallies start to feel like worship services, and elections start to feel like salvation or damnation. Our hearts should be tied more to the one who's on the throne than in the White House. And so let me just pray over us. And God, we are so grateful to be in a nation that has the diversity and the opinions that are able to be expressed. And God, we just pray that in this election cycle, that the way that we lead ourselves and the way that we lead our churches will lead people towards Jesus, not away. God, I just pray for all of these guys who are leading out their churches and leading out in a very polarized time. God, I pray that you would just give them the words to say, God, to know how to navigate the difficult conversations, to be able to lead their staff in a way that long after a political candidate is gone, we don't lose ourselves or lose our churches in the midst of the opinions that people have. God, help us to lift up Jesus high. And God, I just pray that during this season that these churches would be a beacon of hope, that they would be places that people can trust and go to when things feel so uncertain. So God, I just pray a blessing on these guys, pray a blessing on their ministries and on their families, and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you being here. Any of the resources you need will go out in email, etc. Those of you that are procrastinating, get yourself to Vegas here in October. And we'll see you guys on the call next month. We have one more call before our time together. So thank you. See you guys.